Alright, so behind me is a rad CB500F, which I have previously modified into its current radical state. And today we're going to continue to modify this thing by adding taller handlebars to it. And we're going to take those handlebars from a CB500X, which is the off-road sister model to the F. Not only are we going to need the handlebars off the X, but we're also going to need the controls and the cables because we need those things to be longer as well. So today, that's what's up. And this is a bit of a longer video because it's a complete step-by-step how I did it from the beginning to the end. So in case anybody out there wants to do the same modification, this video is for you. So this box contains the actual handlebars I'm going to be using, and I'm going to put a link in the description of this video to all of these parts. So if you want to do this conversion yourself, just look in the video description. It'll make your life a lot easier. First thing I'm going to do is undo this top clamp here. These are 12mm bolts on there.
Well, I've got a couple answers.
Answers to my questions?
Yeah. I have questions for sure.
Alright, so how do I become rich?
Apparently you breed am staffs.
Alright, next I'm going to move these handlebars off here a little bit and put the new ones on there, and then I'm going to transfer everything over. Just moving these forward like that. The new ones can go on. I'm going to put that clamp back on here and clamp it down, but I'm not going to tighten or torque everything down yet, because once we get everything transferred over, then I'm going to kind of want to set these things to where I want them or where I like them, and then we'll torque stuff down. Alright, so I'm going to start by taking the mirrors off the ends here. So on mine we've just got these Allen head bolts on the end. There we go. Alright, so now I want to remove this switch here on the throttle side. Basically there's a screw right here and another screw down there. Loosen those guys, and then this whole thing is now loose, and there is a zip tie. There's a little zip tie guy right here. Release that guy and sort of undo the zip tie. So I'm just going to leave this guy loose for right now, and we'll take that off in a second. Next I'm going to undo the front brake lever right here. Let's do that. I've got a couple bolts here on the end. These are 8mm heads on these. So I'm just going to loosen them. I'm going to remove them entirely, actually. Alright, there's two. This cap here comes off, and then the brake thing is loose. Alright, and then you will kindly note on this brake lever that we've got a couple wires going to the actual hydraulics of this thing, and these are basically the brake sensors, so that when you actually depress the lever or pull the lever on the brakes, this sends a signal to your bike that you are braking, and that is what turns on your brake lights. So I'm just going to undo these guys. They're just little basic blade connections, and they pull right off like that. Set those aside, and now we've got this is connected just to the brake hose here that goes to the front wheel. So I am going to just set this aside. Alright, so I'm going to leave this guy on still. I'm going to move to the other side here, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to remove the clutch lever on that one. Same thing, 8mm heads on these. Take that off, that guy is loose now. And this guy also has the same deal coming from the switch section here to the lever. I'm going to disconnect those as well. So right now I'm going to let this sort of sit here. Another one of these here zip ties, and so I'm just going to pull that up and release. Now should be a big moment when I'm able to pull this end off. And then just have this end over here. I'm going to loosen up the switches on the left hand side here. Same thing, a couple screws on the back side. That should allow me to move this guy like that, sort of get it out of the way. And then this is maybe the most difficult part, is getting off the old hand grip off, because this is the only grip that's actually attached to these handlebars. I think the easiest way is probably with some compressed air, so I'm going to try that. Alright, so I've seen other people do this, and it looks really cool, where you take your compressed air, get underneath the edge of the grip there and blow air into this, and then it will slide right off. So we're going to try it. Let's see if we can make that work. Aha, it works. I can go ahead and pull this end off here. Now there's our old handlebars. Compare them to our new ones. You can see The new ones are a bit taller. All right, so now the astute among you might have already guessed that because we're raising the handlebars here, it is going to affect things like the cable lengths on this bike, the clutch cable, the throttle cables, and possibly even the electrical wires here. The lengths of these things are all going to need to be lengthened, and there's a pretty easy workaround for that. For the lazy amongst us, me included, you just use the cables for the CB500X, and that's what we're going to do here. We're going to swap out all those components to the CB500X versions. With that in mind, what I'm going to do next is remove the electrical switches from this bike, and then we'll put on the new ones. All right, and so here's an example of a new one here. It's got this little rubber band on it still, holding it all together because it doesn't come with the little screws. It comes with basically, it comes with the stripped down stuff. It doesn't come with a little throttle tube or anything like that either. So we're going to swap over all that stuff from the old one to this one. And you can see that it's a nice, neat little package where it has this plug on the end. All these wires run to just one plug that you can easily swap out this whole thing. In order to get to that plug, we've got to remove the side cover here, which is held on by like 3 screws. So it's the same for the side cover on the other side, but there's a screw here, here, and then there's one back there. So, and they're all Allen head bolts on there. All right, and with those 3 screws out, you can now remove the side cover. And underneath here, now we start to see little plugs and things where things go. And this, if you follow the wires from the actual switches up here, you can find that they go down through here and they plug in on the back side here. There's a couple wire tie downs here. So you can see right there, there's a wire tie down. We want that guy to come out of there. All right, and that's not too hard. That's what it looks like on the back side. It's one of these guys that you compress like that and pull it out, and I was able to do that with my fingers. There's another one up on the back side over here. Then the big main wire connection is down here. Another one of those little zip tie connection things right there. There we go. Now that thing is loose. You can get this connection a lot easier. And it's got this sort of dust cover thing over here, dust jacket if you will. You can sort of pull that stuff down out of the way for the moment. And that gives us access to the actual connector. Look at that guy. We flip it over and we kind of see on the back side there's this little tab, this little square guy there. Press that down and that should disconnect that sucker. So there we go, there's the old one. Now we can sort of thread this thing out. All right, so in order to remove that fully, there's this bolt right there. And that's on the back side of that. There's a whole bunch of stuff that organizes all these cables and things running down through there. So we're gonna need to remove that for various reasons, but at this point, so we can remove that switch control. So that's a 12mm bolt head on there too. All right, pull that out like that. And this bolt also is the top of your triple clamps there, so that's pretty important. We're gonna wanna make sure we get the proper torque specs when we're done, and I'll have that in the end of the video. Now we can see on the back side of this, you can see these little organizers here. This is the one that has our switch on it, this guy here. This whole thing is like a sort of clam sort of thing, and it comes apart like that. Then we can start sliding things out from there. That is our brake lever. Slide that out. We're going to revisit that in a second. On the back side of that is our switch. All right, so now the switch is partly free from the bike. All the electrical stuff is free, but we still got some throttle cables right here. And we're gonna wanna remove these as well. So we gotta get some wrenches out for that. 14mm, these guys. I'm gonna unscrew it completely out of there. All right, and now get our screwdriver out again. I'm gonna remove these screws on here. Set those aside because we didn't get new ones with our new switches, so we're gonna need to retain and reuse these guys. All right, now this thing should split in half. And I'm curious to see what's on the inside of this because I've never seen it before. Oh, look at that. So that whole thing, the switch, all the electronic stuff is on one side of the clamshell here. Then in here's our throttle cables. It's kind of cool. Check that out. What we want to do is actually release these throttle cables from the engine side So that will give us plenty of excess cable here, and this will easily come off at that point. So to do that, I'm gonna remove the side cover on my bike here first, and your stock side cover is gonna look different. All right, I'm also going to remove the seat. All right, the side cover should come off. All right, and then with the side cover off, you could probably get in here and do this, because you can see right down in there, that's where all the throttle stuff is. There's your cables as they come in there to the actual throttle body on the bike right down there. So you could probably get in here and finagle that, but for demonstration purposes, I'm also going to remove the gas tank, because then we should be able to see this thing a lot better. So to do that, there's a couple bolts on the top here. Up here you can see these two guys right there. There's another bolt, this guy right here. All right, so with these two removed, let's see, now this thing is loose. All right, so all I want to do is prop this thing up a little bit. So I've got a block of wood to stick underneath it. All right, so now if we go down in here, we can kind of get a better view. So you can see there's the two cables coming in, and I'm going to release those nuts there and remove those cables. We actually have new cables, longer cables that we're going to install. These just need to come out at this point. All right, so to loosen those cables on the throttle, I've got an 8 and 10 millimeter wrench here. There, and that pulls it off. All right, so now they're both free there. All right, so now moving from the top here down below, see those little round circles there? These two circles, that's the end of those cables. So we need to pull those cables down and sort of thread them out. See, on this one it might be easier to do first. Comes down like that, and there's a little slot. And this should wiggle out of that slot. So there it is, there's the end of the cable. That one is out. Same thing on this one. That cable goes into that little slot right there. And then you kind of wiggle it out. Now both of those are free from the throttle body. And you can see up at top here again, both of those are loose. So now we can pull them all the way through. There is underneath here, there's like a kind of a little organizer kind of thing that they sort of run through, but I think I can pull stuff easily out the side of that. We also have to disconnect the clutch cable, which also runs through there. And the clutch cable is conveniently located right here. So that's this guy here. And it is indeed a 12. So, that one comes. I'm loosening all this stuff up so we can get movement in there. And then I gotta pull the clutch cable, or the clutch lever here, forward a little bit, and then push that off to the side, and it comes out. And then this, the little nut comes off, and this pulls back. And everything is loose from there. I'm gonna put the nut back on there so we don't lose it. Now, all three cables that we're going to be replacing are loose and can be pulled back through here. So like I said, there's a little thing underneath here I can feel where all those cables sort of run through. There we go. Yeah, there's like a little lip thing down there. If you can just pull them out from that lip. Now over here you can kind of see our cables running through. There's another little, this is a metal little organizer thing that they run through up here. I think I should be able to just pull them through though. See, there's one. There's two. Now our whole thing here is free from the bike. All right, so next we've got this thing. I'm gonna leave the grip on the throttle tube. I'm gonna try and remove this throttle tube from the bike. So now we've got plenty of room here. These cables are nice and loose. They come off real easy. And now we've got our throttle tube. I can just transfer this onto the new switch. All right, so I've got my new throttle cables right here. These are off the CB500X. Swap those over onto throttle cable first, and we'll do just the reverse of what we just did here. So here's our old one for some guidance here. That's where the threaded one goes, it's on the top, and on the bottom is where the other one goes. I'm gonna put the top one on here first now that we know how it works. And thread that on there. And then the bottom one. Try to get that in there. So then they're both on there like that. I'm gonna leave everything sort of loose at the moment while we get it back on the bike. So just like we did a second ago to take them off, I'm gonna thread these things back down through. All right, so first, got this little section up here, run through there. All right, success. All right, so coming back, we can see the throttle body there again. Here are our cables. And then looking at our cables, now we got to remember which one's which. One of them has 2 nuts on the end of it, and one of them just has 1 nut. And so the one with the single nut, that goes furthest towards the front of the bike. All right, so it goes in there. All right, so that guy's kind of in there. Now this top nut. We got the bottom nut is underneath this little lip thing here. And that sort of holds that nut in place. And then you rotate the top nut like this, and that tightens this thing down. Readjust this later, or for right now, just to hold it in place. And sort of tighten that thing down so it doesn't come off. And then the other one, this guy, this had 1 nut on the bottom and 1 nut on the top. Like that. That's how they go in. And then I'm going to tighten that top nut for right this second. Until we get everything sorted out on this thing, and then we can make adjustments and sort of fine tune this thing later. But so now that is kind of sorted in there. All right, so we still got the old clutch cable hanging out here. This thing, it runs up through here, through sort of, you kind of see it move around there. So it runs up through here and sort of behind this head tube here, runs behind that to the other side. And you can see it comes up sort of through here. And so we've got like a little holder right here that sort of runs through, and then kind of comes up and goes to our actual clutch lever here. So the easiest thing at this point is just to release it from the clutch lever, back this nut out completely, and then this guy should wiggle out of here. Same way it did on the other stuff. And to remove this thing, which just lines up those 2 slots on there, and that comes off. We're about to push this thing down through here without too much problem. Sort of yank that. And there is the old one out. We've got the new one right here. Let's compare these real quick just for length. This thing's only like 3 inches or something longer. It's not a huge difference, but it makes a difference. All right, so this threads up by that throttle body, and it runs into that. This little plastic piece up here on the bottom side of that, there is that little ledge that I mentioned earlier, and it goes up in there. But I'm going to wait a second to do that at the last minute, basically. And run this up behind the head tube and over to the other side. And then over here, there's this little metal loop here, this sort of oval. It runs up through there. Run this cable through there, run the little threaded part of our cable housing through there as well. I'll put that nut back on. Kind of see how that would slot in on the back side there. So that's all we're doing, pulling that cable in through there like that. And that is all I'm going to do right here for now. All right, so we're now returning to the front here, and where we disconnected that cable earlier, I'm now going to put a new one on there as planned. Sort of. So here's our new one. All right. There's this guy. That is a completely different connection. All right, so I've run into a bit of an unexpected problem here, and this is where we get into real custom work, so to speak. Our old electrical connection is this nice wide thing, right? And here is the new one. You can see the new one, the CB500X version, is a different size for some reason. I mean, everything else is exactly the same on these things. Like, the controllers are exactly the same. So I don't understand why they would put separate ones on there, other than to ensure at the factory or something when they're putting stuff together that they don't mess up parts. If we count the terminals inside here, all these little shiny, sort of, they're kind of a gold metal in there, those little terminals. That's where all the wires connect right there. And if we count those in each one of these, there's 8. There's 8 in both of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to de-pin or take these little terminal pieces out, and those are connected directly to the wires. I can take those out and basically swap over the connector part, the gray, the plastic part. I'm going to take the plastic part off the old one and put it onto the new one. Alright, so now I'm bringing it over here. I'm going to run it down through here, like the way I found it. Attach the other part to the actual handlebars. Got this guy, setting it in here. It sort of slots in like that. We've got like a big oval and a little circle there. And I'm just going to wrap these things around. And go ahead, slot that one in like so. Run it back. Do the same thing with this one. In there, we've got our little cables hooked up. Now, I'm going to take this guy, connect it together with this guy, slide it together, the wires go in there, throw my screws in there. Alright, with the handlebars off, now I can just slide this thing on the end of the handlebars. There we go. Alright, so looking at the other side of the bike, I've taken this side cover off and everything already. Those guys, they run down through here. There's a little snap guy on here that holds them on. Got some bent nose pliers here. These are handy for this sort of thing. So there's another one of these little snap connectors. There we go. There's that. There's another one back in here as well. You can see all these ones that are sort of like purplies or bluish. Those are all the same thing. Here's the one we want. Let's see if I can pull that one off. There we go. There's that one, and then trace this down to this guy here. And this, of course, looks like the one on the other side, which is our connector that we're looking for. So again, it's got this little jacket thing on here. I'm going to take that off. This should come off from here. Snake it out. And there is that guy all out of there. So now we probably have the same issue with this one. Let's take a look at the new one. Alright, so here's our old one. The old connector. Here is our new one. Let's see. Oh, that one, that looks a lot like the old one. Oh my god. Is it the same or am I missing something? Looks exactly the same. Yes! They look exactly the same. Why is the one on the, they're different part numbers. Why is the one on the other side different? I don't understand. Got these two together, I'm stretching them out to see if they're different lengths, and yeah, they are. See, this is what I expected from both of them. I thought both of these connectors would be the same like that. And I could just plug and play, you know? Fortunately, it's only on the one side that's a pain that you gotta swap the pins over. This side, oh, this made my life a lot easier because now I can just plug and play. All right, so back over here, we got our new one. We'll go ahead and snake this thing through. Now, plug that in. All right, then we go ahead, put this on the handlebars. All right, so on these switches, there's a little nub inside here. So when you're sort of putting that clamshell thing together, it's something to be aware of when you're sliding around in here. These actually have a position that they are designed to set at, and they correlate to a hole. You can see there's a little hole drilled in the end of the handlebar. There's another similar hole over here that the switches will line up with, and this thing will sort of, bam, you'll feel it sort of fall into place right there, and that's where you want to tighten it down. So right there, you can see the hole right there. That's where it is, and so this should, at some point, I should be able to line this up in here like that. There it is, right there. And it kind of locks in like that. So that is where it's supposed to sit. I'll go ahead and tighten these screws down. You can see how this seals up real nice. There's no gaps in there. There shouldn't be any gaps on either side. And you can see from the front side, sort of where they sit. The actual throttle grip over here, it comes out past the end of the handlebars. You can see there. Next thing I need to sort out is the clutch cable right here. So we got clutch cable, we've got our clutch lever stuff here. Go ahead and install this onto our new cable. Alright, so let's kind of roughly on there. All right, we've got our connector here. I'll go ahead and actually connect it. I'm hoping my repinning of this thing actually works. Huh? That would be cool. All right, connected. Found a longer one. I took off the old one. I need a longer one because it goes around this top part right here. All right, and this plugs in back there. All right, so then this one again, we've got that little clamshell-y thing. This guy kind of goes in the back of that. Jam that in there for right now. And we still got to do the brake line. That's our big finale. All right, so for the brake line, this is where a little bit of aftermarket kit comes in. Where I've got a braided brake line, a steel braided brake line, which is in theory an upgrade from the stock one. So, and this one, the reason I did that is because this one is longer. We need a longer brake line than the stock one, and this one is longer than that. And since I was going longer, why not go custom, right? Why not upgrade to a steel braided brake line? But yet this one is a cheap version of one, so we'll see how well it does. I'll put a link in the description to this guy as well. I could also have done the CB500X brake line, and that was not expensive. It was like about the same price as this guy, which is under $20. Swapping over the brake line is the tricky part. The way I'm going to do this, we've got our brake fluid reservoir is up here on the lever, and if it's up above this guy, it's going to drain, all that fluid is going to drain down as soon as this opens up. I'm going to lower this guy below the level of this one here, so all the fluid will, gravity will hold the fluid down in this line. This is a 14 millimeter on here. On the new one, it comes with some banjo bolts and some crush washers. So each bolt takes 2 crush washers. You want one on each side of the fitting, like so. Let's get this off of here. Alright, so now I'm going to take this banjo bolt out and swap it over. Make sure I get new crush washers on there. Wind this guy through here. Alright, so there are a couple spots on here, like right here where there's supposed to be a bracket that goes around that and then connects it to the bike, like right here. And you can see this bracket is much bigger than our little grommet we've got that comes with the new brake line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off these grommets that are on the old brake line. We'll try and wrap them around here and then just use some electrical tape to seal them up again. Oh yes, we got that one off. This one around the new one, I think. Yeah, I think that will work. Let's tape it up. There, it's more like it's supposed to be. So now we got the brake line and the electrical wires that go to the controls on the right hand side of the bike are all on there. All right, so now that we've got the brake line system all together in one piece again, I'm gonna go ahead, take the reservoir cap off here and see where we are on our fluid level. Add fluid, bleed the brakes, all that sort of stuff. If you want to see how I'm doing this, there's a whole nother video in the description. I'll link so you can go check that out. All right, brakes are bled, those are done. Got some stopping power once again. All right, so now back to this throttle body here. I'm bringing my cables down each side here. It's pretty obvious which side they go on. I'm loosening up these cables here as much as possible. I brought that one nut up all the way, which should allow me to push this cable down that way, which will give me the extra clearance and everything I need to hook the end of the cable in on the bottom here. I've got a lot of slack in that thing still. You can see right there how much slack there is when I move the throttle. Like, look at that. So I need to do quite a bit of adjustment on that one. Let's get the other one hooked up first though. So I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna remove that cable housing from its little hanger up here. That frees this cable up entirely so I can manipulate it down and around and hook it in at the bottom. Put it back on its perch. And then now that that's back on its little hanger, I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna tighten down that bolt on the top there, the little adjuster, until that is sort of, starts to get tight, hopefully. Let's see. That one is tight. This other one is still, oh, that's tightened up a little bit actually. Now that we've, by tightening down that first bolt a bit, get quite a bit of that slack. Oh yeah. That's pretty perfect right there, actually. All right, now with this thing where I want it, I'm gonna go ahead and actually tighten that top nut down so it is nice and tight. All right, so there's how mine ended up looking. Once I've got all the adjustments made and everything's nice and tight and snappy in there, the throttle cables are all nice and snappy when I'm doing this up here. Now up here on the actual throttle, we've got these two here nuts. These guys are nuts. And I'm gonna go ahead and tighten these down at this point. All right, so I've got the throttle all hooked up there and this thing all buttoned down. What else? Oh, and then on the bottom of this. So right here, we can see these are our electrical connectors we took off earlier. Those need to go back on here. I'm not entirely sure what order they go on. So I'm going to try it out. I'm gonna put them on one way, and if that doesn't work, we'll put them on a different way. All right, and so with those plugged in, this side is buttoned up. Everything is working great on here. We've got some nice brake feel. And now we need to finish up this guy over here. The clutch lever right now is doing absolutely nothing. And we still need our grips over there, and we still need to plug everything in. And on the clutch lever, we've got this little electrical connection here as well that comes from our switches here. Go ahead and plug this in. Again, I don't really know the order on this. I'm plugging one on one side and one on the other side, and if I need to, something's not working the way it's supposed to, I will swap them. But I suspect this is a very simple switch where it doesn't really matter. Tighten this thing down as well. All right, so my clutch lever still doesn't do anything, so we need to make some adjustments. I could probably start making some adjustments right here. That's not gonna do it, so let's go to the clutch itself. So down here, this guy, basically, I wanna stretch this out. The old one had two nuts on it. So you can kind of see here, it had two nuts. This one, the new one only got one nut. We need two, man. Or at least I'd like to have two. Why not? Why not, man? All right, so I'm gonna throw this one back on here and we'll see if we can steal one off the old version. See if this thread is the same. Looks like it should be the same size thread. So, all right, so let's throw this back in here. I'm gonna throw another nut over the top here. Yes. All right, let's go ahead. Get that back in there. Now we can play with this. Tightness there. Now if I play with the lever, see there's still quite a bit of slack right there before it even gets to the clutch. So you can tighten this thing up some more, try and get rid of that slack. See now there's less slack there. Now that probably will work right there. All right, the free plate and the clutch lever, the amount that this will move like that, should be 10 to 20 millimeters. That should lock everything in place. And now before we get too much further, I'm gonna start this bad boy up and make sure everything's working on it, especially the right side controllers there, to make sure that all that stuff is working, the electronics that we rewired kind of sort of, to make sure that that is actually lined up the way it's supposed to and actually functions. So let's try this thing out. Oh yes, look at that, high beams are on. Turn the high beams off. Nice. That's the start button. Alright, so our hazards, they work, man. Hazards are working. Sweet. Turn those off. Now this seems to work. Because what? Listen. That's working. Now can we start it? Start button work? Oh mama. Alright, that's cash money right there, folks. Cash money. Totally. We are like a professional. We did a good job there. Leave that alone. Now I'm going to go ahead and button up all this other stuff. Put our side covers on. Put our basic stuff on. I'm going to put that grip on over there. Let's do that next. Alright, so this is a trick that my pops taught me when I was a wee shaver. So this is our grip we want to put on there. And then this is some soap and water. And I'm just going to sort of pump this thing full of some soap and water. And then it should help to lubricate this thing. It should slide on there without too much problem. And then later on, the water and everything dries up and then it sticks on there. All right, and then the torque specs for these bolts up here, that's 16 foot-pounds. And then these bolts up here on this top clamp holding this down, these are 20 foot-pounds. For each of these control switches here, the torque on the screws that hold these clamshell things together is 1.8 foot-pounds. And then these bolts here that hold the levers on, they're supposed to be torqued to 9 foot-pounds. And after getting everything torqued down, I took the bike out for a test ride. I was surprised initially at how much this changed the feel of the bike. I mean, my hands are up much higher. It was much more comfortable in a seated upright position to ride, but it made the bike feel like an entirely different bike. Like to the point where I was like, if the engine felt different somehow, I don't know how, but somehow, it definitely made it feel like the corners turning the bike was completely different, and it made me feel like I had more leverage to turn the bike. It made the bike easier in a way to turn. And I've ridden the bike a couple times since making this modification, and so far I like it a lot. It feels much more like a scrambler. It feels more off-road capable somehow. And I'm not so sure on the brake line whether or not I feel like I have more stopping power or not. I could say I did, but it would be more of a psychological factor there. I'm not sure if factually I do or not, but I'm happy with the brake line so far. This is more of a long-term question though on that brake line, whether or not it works out to be a good idea to go with the cheap brake line. I'll let you know. But so far, very happy with this modification. I'll keep you updated on it. I've got some more mods to do to this bike yet, like the addition of an accessory electrical outlet. I've got to revisit the seat, do some heated grips I'd like to do, bash plate on the bottom, and some various other things yet to come in the future on this thing. So I'm definitely not finished with this bike. I am enjoying riding it though. So thanks for watching this video. We'll see you next time.